अर्चित, यार दिल्ली में ना बड़ी गर्मी पड़ रही है, बिल्कुल तेल निकल गया अपना। तुम्हारा क्या हाल है गुड़गांव में?
आपके पास कोई इस गर्मी में, एक तो गर्मी हो रही है, फिर आप गंदे जोक सुना रहे हो। कोई बेटर जोक्स हैं आपके पास?
जोक्स तो नहीं है, फैक्ट बता देता हूँ। हमारा ये वाला जो पॉडकास्ट है, ये कहीं ज्यादा वायरल हो गया ना, ज्यादा लोगों ने सुन लिया तो
हम्म।
भिड़े भाई है ना, अमेरिका वाले भिड़े भाई,
यू मीन जो
जो
बिडेन?
भिड़े,
हाँ।
जो बिडेन भाई, वो आके
हाँ।
हमारे पे कहीं रेड ना मार दें, क्योंकि हम आज तेल निकालने वाले हैं, तेल के बारे में बात भी कर लेंगे। आई एम स्कैर्ड। लेकिन देखो,
बिकॉज
भिड़े भाई के साथ हमारी दीदी भी हैं, हमारी दीदी भी हैं, तो वो हमारा ध्यान रखेंगी, वो हमारा इंडिया वालों का ध्यान रखेंगी।
straight from the US. Now, right now in India, we have Swetha today with us. So, Swetha is a food researcher and blogger. She blogs at upgrademyfood.com, which I think is a really good title. She writes columns for and produces videos with Hindustan Times. I discovered Shweta's blog last month and it really spoke to me. Sometimes you discover a movie, book, a writer, and then you realize, hey, I really connect with this. And when I actually read the motivations for her blog, I realized why I actually connect with her. And we'll talk about these motivations. So, Shweta, welcome to the show. It's an honor to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Archit, Sadaf. It's an honor to be with you guys. It's such a fun show, and I'm so happy that you guys have me over. So I'm looking forward to the conversation.
So, Shweta, you aren't a traditionally trained journalist. So, what made you start blogging about food? What were your motivations?
Huh. So yeah, you're right. I actually did my master's in industrial engineering and worked as an industrial engineer for about 10 years. And then right around 2010 time frame, my dad fell extremely sick. He and my mom both have been diabetic for 30 years of their life, but my mom's journey has been a lot more, steady and normal, like every other diabetic older person. But my dad had to get a kidney transplant, and then it failed, and then he had to go into dialysis multiple times, and so the last 2 years of his life was extremely difficult for him. And just watching him transform from the person that he was a larger than life person. He loved life, he loved food, he laughed very lovely, and even just thinking about him makes me very it's anyway the point is that he that made an impression that the change that can happen, and how a person's personality can change because of the trauma you're going through, and just feeling so sad to see your dad go through that. So anyway, I wanted to do what is the best of my abilities to prevent the same thing. Hopefully not. I know that the probability, it's a probability game, but I just wanted to do whatever I can from my end to avoid going down that path by talking, by researching about food, and then writing about food as well. So then the blog came about around 2015, and then I started writing about my experiences, about healthy recipes, about what goes behind food products, and then the processing of the products. Because even in my engineering, I used to be a consultant, and I used to go to different food manufacturers. At that time, I was just viewing it with the lens of an IE, but then I started piecing like, oh yeah, that's the kind of manufacturing that they were doing, and what is my expectations as a mom, as a consumer myself, and then started piecing all those information, and then working on my blog, which then spiraled into the Hindustan Times column, and then the videos and so on. And it's been a very very fun journey for me, very intellectually exciting journey for me. So I'm happy that people resonate with those thoughts as well.
So
Thank you for sharing
there's
that. I know it's hard to go through and tell us about a difficult time in your life, but thank you for sharing that. And go ahead, Sadaf, you were talking.
So I think there is something in engineers. There's something in their genes, not the jeans pant wala jeans. Archit, just clarifying for you. Uh, there is something in the genes because so many engineers I have met, they're like पहला इंजीनियर करेंगे, उसके बाद दुनिया जहान की चीज कर लेंगे, मतलब दुनिया जीत लेंगे. Almost every engineer I have known, right? So from that genes, I also want to talk about other genes because you mentioned about uh, picking up healthy choices. So first, of course, knowing about the healthy choices, what were those healthy choices? And then I'll come to the main follow-up questions.
So that has also been a journey, right? So because I initially had my recipes were about trying to, that's why my upgrade my food came about, is just trying
Yeah.
to take this 1% improvement, right? Like, so you don't want to, of course, portion control is one idea, but then also that you replace a refined flour with, say, a whole wheat flour, or you say you take small improvements, or you reduce the amount of sugar by adding, say, I have a recipe in my blog which the kesari is made with mashed bananas and things like that. Again, you can say that the sugar content might be almost inching similar, but a couple of things with those kind of altering those recipes is, one, you get used to a lower, just a palate, you start reducing it to a more normal level. That was one of my aims, especially with my children. And the other thing was that the added fiber, it does help. And so I started playing around with adding flaxseed powders here and there. And so I started looking into the numbers behind. So it's not like a superfood is, yeah, I take it into face value as a superfood, like what is happening. So if you I look at all the whole grains, and I highly recommend to any of the listeners in the program a book called On Food and Cooking by Harold McGee. He just lays out everything about all the foods in a very scientific terms, and how they work and what are the components and so on. And that was my base starting point. And then from there you jump into looking into the numbers. For example, in grains you have barley, which is an extremely low glycemic index. It says 25 as opposed to, say, rice. So namasuri would be around 70. And same with ponni or things like that. That's normal South Indians use. Again, the barley might be quite a jump because not everybody will be used. So then you jump down to, say, a parboiled rice, which always a parboiling helps you with a little bit. The parboiled version of a rice, say a sona masuri or a ponni, would be lower in glycemic index compared to the regular raw version of it, just because of the processing technique, just a few points lower. And then you can jump down to, say, a black rice or a red rice, which comes around 50s and 40s. And then you really want to control, you can go down to barley and so on. So those were some of the shifts that you can make in your diet. Not like next day you wake up and start changing everything, but slowly incremental changes. And then to the point where now a lot of people who take that health journey will realize at some point where they would say, like, I can't pass by an ice cream shop without ordering one or something. And then they will actually be to the point where they can say no, or they can take just the amount they want. Even that process itself is sometimes not, you can't just take it for granted. Not everybody can have that inane intuition to override all the sensory. We are getting these buy this, eat this. We're getting all these signals all the time, and so kind of developing that ability of the palate to slow down that intense emotion to eat right away, kind of thing.
In this answer, I sense the industrial engineer in you, because you're talking about Kaizen in a way, small improvements which eventually lead to significant changes in the
Exactly, you got
in the
it.
long run. Yeah, and I'm a firm believer that you don't have to sacrifice on taste altogether to eat healthy. I mean, there was this movement against fats, and we will talk about fats a few years back, and that uh, you know took away a lot of taste satiety from the food. But if you use the right ingredients, as you said, you can, like barley, for example, instead of maida, which is a refined flour, you can eat tasty and healthy foods, because good food should appeal to your body as well as your mind. So eating tasty food actually appeals your mind. So you need to balance both out as well.
Absolutely.
And somewhere in between, while you were Swetha talking about changes, you also mentioned very interesting word. You mentioned about altering, right? So we'll talk about the oil itself, because you said
Oh, you
altering.
mean altering?
Yes, sir. You
I
got the
thought, Sadaf,
joke.
I thought your pronunciation is wrong, Sadaf, and you're not making a joke.
सारा अंग्रेजी में पढ़ाए हैं अब्बा हमारे, बहुत पैसा खर्चा किया था हम पर, थोड़ा बहुत तो हमें भी आता है। अब पढ़ लिया है। खैर, तो
Guruji.
So we'll talk about the oil. We'll alter that first, because oil matters. और सुबह से यही चल रहा है, मैं अर्चित इसी बारे में बात कर रहे हैं, oil matters. So I just want to understand that, did we use the same kind of oil all
Yeah.
throughout? If
Yeah.
we go back in history versus present, and or maybe 2 generations back, not even that. Agar
Yeah.
nahi, if we didn't use oil all this while, then what were we using? Were we using oil
Yeah.
at all?
Yeah, so absolutely, we definitely, there's been a huge transition in the past 100 years. So it's just 2 generations, or you ask even your grandma or anybody in the older generation, they'll say that they would go to a local chucky dealer and they would probably even hand them over the seeds or whatever. They would buy them, or they might they might have that. So there was a very, what was the supply chain there? So you give your oil, sesame seed or whatever, to the chucky, the person, and then they would make the oil right in front of you, and they would give it to you, and you would use it, and then that's the supply chain. Versus now, what is the supply chain? So the farmer, they harvest it, and then they send it to the refinery, the makers, and then the refinery, and then it goes to a grocery, to a warehouse, and then it sits, and then it goes to the grocery chain, and then you buy it, you get it, and then there's a 2 year period in the entire thing, right? So the whole transition happened around late 1800s to early 1900s. What There was the development of refining of oils, and you would not want to know why was that happening, right? So there's this, the whole history of oil boils down to, the simplest story that I can tell you that pretty much replicates how it happened in the entire industry is this history of Crisco and history of cottonseed oil. So in late 1800s, cotton was heavily agriculture manufactured. They were using the cotton. There were a lot of seeds left over. They had no idea what to do. Farmers were leaving them to kind of go rancid by the river and dumping them illegally and so on. There were a lot of issues in the US. So then they decided, okay, so what can we do with this cotton seed? If you press them, you get a very bad smelling dark oil. Okay, and no culture in around the world, not just Indian, you take China, you take any Africa, any other long-standing cultures have not used cottonseed oil. And there's an explanation in chemical terms. We'll get to that part later, but nobody has used it. So this is a very offensive smelling oil. So they decide, okay, the chemists decide this is the time refineries are happening. David Besson, a person, came and he decided he's going to refine the oil. So he puts it through this deodorizing, bleaching and all these processes to strip away all the colors and the smell and everything. And at the end of the day, you get this neutral tasting, smelling oil. And at this point, even still then, they were not considering giving that for food, because nobody wants to eat cottonseed oil food. Okay. So then what they do is they use it for soaps and making soaps and candles. Then what happened? So that was a reasonably sustainable business. That's what they did. And this is early days of Procter & Gamble. So then then candles stopped being used, electricity started coming mainstream. The soaps they started using palm oil, which was then at that point starting to come in from Africa. They still stuck with this huge batches of cottonseed oil. So then they hydrogenate it. Then they make it into a solid. So the process of hydrogenation turns any liquid oil into a solid form. So for example, if we have natural oils like palm oil or coconut oil, which gets solid at room temperature or colder than that, or cocoa butter, for example, that is naturally occurring saturated fats. But let's say you take any liquid oil and you want to convert that, you put it through a process of hydrogenation. And that's what they did. So they did that. And then they made something called Crisco, which expands into crystallized cottonseed oil. So now remember, they are not putting the word cottonseed oil anywhere. They're just putting it into a dabba saying Crisco. And they are using words like it comes from plants, it's a vegetable oil. They're using all these marketing analogies that make it sound like it's the freshest, best oil you can buy. And they want it as a way to compete against butter and the other solid fats. So then that becomes a big hit, and play by play, this exact model of marketing is replicated in India. And so they do the exact same thing in Gujarat, and where cottonseed oil was not, people were not ready to use it, and they said, no, we've got to use it. And then they started developing Vanaspati, and you have ads which show Vanaspati is what a good mom would feed a child, and that's very healthy, and it is all that marketing language, and the dalda, Vanaspati, all that came came into being as well. So this whole, so you take an oil which is not used and which is a waste oil, so your initial cost of materials is extremely low, and you convert it into something that people, you can fool people into thinking that it is a good oil for you, and you can sell it at a much lower cost than your traditional oils. Then that's how they expanded their market share in these kind of oils. And then refined oils, with every refined oil is pretty much the same story. So you take canola, safflower, sunflower, those are all seed oils which are not traditionally used by any of the cultures, because their smoke point is 107 degrees Celsius. So at that point, it's slightly above the boiling point of water. So if you use any of these oils at their unrefined stage, they would catch fire. So obviously, through cultures, what oil can actually withstand the heat. So the traditional cultures would use sesame oil, would use coconut oil, would use mustard oil. All of them unrefined versions have a much higher boiling point, and those started getting either refined or getting used less and less, and they started promoting more of these, which are much more easier to plant and grow in hectares and much more plentiful yields. So you take a cheap base and then you convert it into refined clear oil. There's no traces of any smell, anything. You smell any of these refined oils, you don't get any idea you what it is. Is it a sunflower oil? Is it a, you don't get those characteristics, and then you sell it. That's the usually the game.
Right.
But when
And
you're
of
saying
course,
unrefined oil, when you're talking about the unrefined oil and you're saying it was getting burnt, right, or catching fire basically, and that's why. So is that then a good thing or the bad thing? And if people were using unrefined oil, then how were they using unrefined oil?
So that's the thing. So if you take mustard oil, even unrefined, the smoke point I believe is 250 degrees. Mustard and ghee, even at the unrefined level, it's at 250 degrees Celsius. So what is that?
Right.
That's almost frying levels, right? That is a high heat. If you take sesame and coconut, it is 175 degrees Celsius, and that's tadka level. You don't have to burn it. You normally you can do. You probably don't want to fry in it. Extra virgin olive oil is 207 degrees Celsius. So all these cultures now, so if you take Indian culture with our mustard, sesame, and coconut and ghee, they have found out, they've cracked which is the temperature at which you can use unrefined, because there was no refining. Who was doing the refining for you? There was no refining. They would filter it and they would, no solids, because you don't want to burn it, but there was no refining of colors and aroma all stripped away. There's no such thing. They were using it. And then if you go to China and all, lard was used, which is animal fats, right? They also have a higher, and they were also using sesame oil. For all the soybean that they produce, did you know that Chinese cultures do not use soybean oil traditionally? This was a
oh,
very
that's
later
interesting.
stage where they introduced, because again, soybean, same story. The soybean is actually grown as a feed. 80% of soybean produced in this world goes for animal feed, not for human consumption. Only like 20% or even less than that is going for it. So imagine how much of the world we're actually tilling for thing to feed to cows and cattle. Now, when they make the cattle feed, the oils in them make them go rancid. So they have to press it out. And now what do they do with all this oil? So again, they repackage it and sell it as soybean oil. So the culture in China and Japan is that they don't use soybean oil as originally, but they would use lard and pig fats and tallow and things like that, and sesame oil in the plant world. Same with Africa. You have palm oil as your base. So much so that even in slave ships that they would send palm oil, because in African cultures, they would consider palm oil as such a key ingredient that they were fearful that if the colonists feared that if they didn't send palm oil in the ships, that the slaves would lose the slaves, because they felt they couldn't feed them. They wouldn't eat anything else without the palm oil or whatever. So though all these cultures figured out oils that would have this high smoke point, have all these wonderful antioxidants and all the nutrition in it, and they boiled it down obviously over trial and error over the years. But then to lower the cost, what would the refined, if you have batch production of say soybean extra you have lying down, you refine it, make it a clear liquid, you sell it for a lower cost. You have Same thing with canola and all. They have high yields. So then you grow them. You cotton seed, you have a byproduct. You take that and you clear it and make it into a clean oil. Then you get it for a much lower market cost, right? And then if it's a cheap oil, then definitely it'll sell better. So then you start introducing that into the cuisine of various countries.
Right, and these oils, all these refined oils, they're actually very bad for our health and are one of the primary causes of lifestyle diseases like diabetes, thyroid, heart disease, or whatnot. And they actually also defame the good oils. People make blanket statements like oil is bad for you, and the truth is that refined oil is bad for you. And in India, interestingly, every region had their own traditional oils. So the south of India had coconut oil, east and north had mustard, Rajasthan sort of had sesame, central India, Gujarat used groundnut, North India used mustard
Yep.
in a way. And the specific choice of edible oil in these various regions uh, is based on traditional eating and cooking habits, and also on local availability and local soils
Correct.
and India's climate. So there was sort of a virtuous cycle in which agriculture, cuisine, and health were mutually supportive of each other. And of course, ghee was there. I think in has been there in most parts of India. Of
Correct.
course, ghee we can do an entire episode on it. And ghee is slightly more expensive, even more expensive than uh, unrefined oil. So refined oil
Sure.
are the most cost effective. Then unrefined oil is slightly more expensive, and ghee is the most expensive out of the three.
Huh. So, see, I'm not a doctor, so I cannot tell you whether refined oil is going to spoil your health and all. There are lots. See, go to PubMed and you'll find a bunch of studies that say this and that, and you need either you need to be a doctor or I don't know. I'm not going to get into that aspect. What I can tell you is from the processing aspect, right? Like from the way it is processed, refining basically there is nothing bad about refining. It is a process. You put anything into it, you strip away the good and the bad. Okay, it's not like all unrefined oils are excellent either. So what is happening? If you take an oil, they have components that are not good for you, which is that it might, for example, it might go bad if you don't filter out the free fatty acids in them. Okay, and then so
Yeah,
you want to get from a source that is so close to you, like your grandma did, and you use it up within a
yeah,
month, or
yeah,
you don't want to buy these big bulks, and then the other aspect is but the refining process also strips away the good part. So it strips away the bad parts and it extends your shelf life, but it also strips away the good part. And that's the point I'm trying to make, is that why would you take a perfectly good thing and run it through the process and take away all the the aroma, the flavor, the antioxidants, everything in it, because you're basically, you want to extend the shelf life to 2 years and batch it along with every other oil on the market, right? So, for example, go to Europe and you say EVO, extra virgin olive oil. Those people, they take it so seriously. They take this extra virgin olive oil and treat it like the king and the queen that it's supposed to be. My point is, our sesame oil and our coconut oil and our ghee are all equally, if not, I mean, I won't say it was more, but it is the same. They're touting sesame oil. David Chang in a recent episode said he predicts that sesame oil is going to be the next superfood in the next 10 years. It's going to be the next olive oil, because every culture, you have Indian, you have Chinese, so many cultures use that, and then they're finding out all these heart healthy effects about sesamolin and all that in sesame oil. So they're finding out all these things, but then why is extra virgin olive oil so popular? There's nothing wrong, it's a beautiful oil. The reason it's so popular is because they have checks and controls. Okay, so you go to the processing with which they manufacture it, the way they do the quality control on it, and the way they certify it. They take this whole damn thing so seriously. So you want to buy really good quality olive oil, extra virgin olive oil, if you can get to that, a third party certified, you can get this thing where they put harvest date. They don't even just put best by date, they put a harvest date. They're proud. We just harvested it less than a month ago. We have tested it for how much of free fatty acids are there. We have tested it for how much of peroxide content is there, which is the level of rancidity in the oil. We have sent a taste testing panel of 13 people who have been trained to identify up to 17 characteristics in the oil. They slurp it, they gargle it, they spit it, or whatever they do, and then they say, yes, this is a good oil. They are spending all this money and effort to say that our oil is so great, buy it, and all around the world people flock to buy it. अरे तो हमारे culture में what is the problem? We have wonderful oils, we have great sesame oils, we have flavorful oils that one of my friends, she was telling just recently, she takes this coconut and they let it dry, and just like now, right now, they go to this mill where they get she collects fresh coconut oil from the garden, whatever they mill, and they do it. And she says that smell, my God, I cannot buy any of these refined. And the process she's doing is like highest level what olive oil they're doing in Italy. Okay, so she is doing it in her village, like 60 kilometers from Chennai. Why can't we all have that? Ask for it. There's nothing wrong. And why can't one of the smaller food manufacturers who want to make a lot of money? Food manufacturing is a very difficult. It's not a easy industry to make profit in. Why can't we double down on resources to certify and to quantify, qualify our oils as really superior and sell it around the world? We should absolutely do it.
So that sort of, from a certification point of view, makes me think about the Banaspati ghee. Okay, and I mean, again, Archit and I have had bunch, as in a lot of debates on this. I think it exists in the market, and hence we should talk about it. Healthy, not healthy is a different thing altogether. I am also, what you said, I'm not doctors to sort of actually say whether it's healthy or not. I have heard from people a bunch of things, so that's that. But when Vanaspati ghee came in, to a large extent, you have also mentioned, right, that to a large extent this was called as the best thing to have. Everybody should have it. You have got the jalebi ad where they're sort of using the Vanaspati. Then even in modern time as well, people are using it, right? Then all the controversy happens and all that stuff. So, एक तो like a very nice branding, and second, what I also wanted to understand is that was this particular ghee also, like calling it ghee because they called it ghee, was this ghee also in a way considered as a quote unquote vegan ghee or vegetarian ghee? So these are the two broad things I want to understand from you. That why, first is why they were promoting it the way it was being promoted, and second is whether this was also considered as a vegetarian/vegan ghee.
Before Shweta answers, how dare you call Vanaspati ghee?
I didn't. I did. They did. People who promoted, they called it Vanaspati ghee. Always.
That's very clever way. That's a very clever way, But see, that is why they this tagging is the way that's why there's a huge fight right now happening in the US where they don't want plant-based milk to be called plant milk. They don't want plant-based ice creams to be called, ice cream. They want that word to be changed because they want people to dissociate. They don't want people to tag on to that. So that Vanaspati ghee, they would tag on because then they want people to tag on. And obviously, a bottle of ghee and a bottle of Vanaspati is going to be extremely different in price-wise. So you're going to appeal to the consumer who wants to save his money, and there's nothing wrong with it. But they sell it from a food producer's point of view, and this is the point I make, and I know Archit agrees with me, is that food producers will do their thing now. If you are a engineer, if I was an engineer for PepsiCo or if I was an engineer for Coca-Cola, I would sell my product. Like I would do whatever it takes to market my product. I would sell. So that is my rosy roti.
Correct.
No, you can't go around saying, I want PepsiCo to be very thoughtful. And she tried. Indra Nooyi tried. Okay, she got clobbered by activist investors. Okay, so it's very hard to maintain the line of capitalism and to act socially responsible. Some companies are trying to do that, no doubt. It's definitely a hard walk to walk, but they will sell you. People will sell you. So I think there's this line in Michael Pollan's book where he says something like his mom has always said, like margarine. What is this nonsense? Why people are touting margarine? I'm telling you, 20 years from now, they're going to say, turn around and say margarine is terrible for you. And he's like, yeah, my mom was right, or something like that. You know, like a lot of people have this intuitive feel like there's something going on with this marketing campaign, right? Like, so if a Maggi noodles is going to say it's great for you, nobody's going to say it's made by flash frying process. I have actually fried the noodles in oil and given it to you. No, they'll say, you know, they have added all, fortified it with vitamins and minerals, so you should be giving this to your child. That's what any food company will do. That's what a person working for that company will do. We as a consumer have to be very, you know, we have to challenge those notions, and we can only either educate ourselves or expect our government to do the right thing for us. Like the company which was manufacturing, I think it was Monsanto, I think, must be anything that happens, these kind of things usually is linked with Monsanto. But anyway, I don't know, I'll just double check on that. The story goes that they mailed out letters to everybody using this product, urging them to write letters to FDA saying that, we cannot survive without this product. We need it. And the FDA was just like volume, like 1 million letters they were receiving saying, do not ban this particular product, this artificial sweetener from the market. So they let it be. And just a few years later, around 85 or something, they started discovering erythritol and maltitol and all that. So it will have an iteration, right? At some point, the new product will come, and then this sugar alcohols are produced by fermentated processes, and nowadays it's very popular and looks like it's naturally found, it's synthetically made, which is still so you have naturally available, then I have naturally found, synthetically made, and then you have synthetic. So it's a better jump from synthetic to naturally synthetically made, but it's found in nature. And then you'd rather have it found in nature, but okay, fine. You're at least making a jump. It took 10 years of leap to get that new discovery. But imagine if FDA had banned that in 75 itself. 10 years ahead itself, they would have got some other alternative. But they didn't want to give up their market share. So a lot of stories like this, like they will have, companies will put out a lot of ways to get the consumer to act very horrified on your behalf. It depends on the power of that, you know, the marketing arm, whatever they have. So yeah, so we as consumers have to be very knowledgeable about it, and we have to be aware, and we have to do the right thing. And sometimes the intuitive feel is also you should go with it. I feel like sometimes you feel like, it doesn't feel right that they are marketing this as a good product.
The CEOs of PepsiCo to increase their profit, but we can counter that by putting out the right information in the world.
100%. So I think that's the thing, right? So I get into this major angst when I see people like so for example, Michael Pollan said something like, you turn the ingredient packet around and see if you have any 5 ingredients or less. And that's just that's a thumb, you know, rule of thumb. If you say
right,
5 ingredients or less, or you see something that your grandma can recognize, okay, it is not like every single thing should be that, but it's a great rule of thumb. You can even research it. You can look it up in Google. And yes, Google will not give you a complete understanding, but why not? Why can I have the right to read something in the label packet and make sense out of it? It doesn't make sense to me. If I see INS 206 and INS something and so many numbers listed in the packet, and I'm thinking, I don't know, I want to buy it. You have absolutely the right to do that. And as a food producer, they will try to figure out ways to fit that need. I mean, the technology is getting so much better. Using chemical additives to make increase your shelf life is a lazy way of manufacturing, in my idea. You have, high pressure packaging, you have freezing, you have, freeze drying, you have canning, you have so many ways of preserving food without using preservatives. इसमें क्या गलती है? Manufacturers will adapt to consumer needs. And as a consumer, you want fresh, good food. What is wrong with that? Nothing wrong with that. Read the ingredients, make sense out of it. If you don't feel like buying it, don't buy it.
Right. On that note, listeners, आप जाके अपने food items के पीछे ingredients पढ़िए. तब तक हम एक छोटी सी break ले लेते हैं.
Hello. It's been another great week here on the IVM Podcasts Network. On The Habit Coach, fitness expert Devrat Vijay, better known as Ninja Dev, tells Ashton about how we can approach fitness the right way. It's all things MMA on the Filter Coffee podcast. Karthik talks to Somesh Kamra. co-host of our Fight Mania podcast. On Raw and Organic, founder of Superkicks, Sangeet Paryani shares his journey with Kunal. Ikaduka Economy is back after a break. Host Abhinav Trivedi and CEO of Helicon Consulting Vikram Limse discuss what SME entrepreneurs can learn from the Sri Lankan crisis. And on the Life Manifesto, Zarina teaches us the art of negotiation. We've got some exciting news for you. IVM Podcast has just launched its merch, and our first line is out now. Head to the IVM Podcast's website and click on the shop tab to check out our first collection of t-shirts. Do follow us on social media. We are IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you're enjoying this show or any of our other shows for that matter, please do tell a friend. Also, don't forget to rate us on any platforms you're listening on. And you can also check us out on YouTube. We're also doing a small listener survey to better understand how you respond to our shows and advertising on the network. We would really appreciate it if you could spare a few minutes to fill it in. It helps us build better shows for you. And finally, we would like to thank our sponsors this week. SBI Life Insurance, Apne Liye, Apno Ke Liye. Jupiter, a digital banking app. Capgemini, get the future you want. Intel vPro, built for business. And Intel, future banao wonderful with Intel-powered laptops.
When it comes to oil, there is often a mention of saturated fats, mono-unsaturated fats or MUFA, and polyunsaturated fats called PUFA. So in very simple words, what is the difference between the three and why should we care about these three names?
And
So-
I have
Sure.
and I have something in my bathroom called loofah. Just I thought हमसे rhyme कर रहे थे
I thought you make a joke about PUFA.
नहीं, वो मेरे फूफा जो इस्तेमाल करते हैं वो है लूफा.
So Lufa, I don't know, but I can tell about the other three.
But you know फूफा.
No, Pufas, I don't know.
अरे ठीक है, हम
So
लूफा के ऊपर बात करेंगे.
every oil that you take actually has a mix of all three. So we keep saying that ghee and coconut oil are saturated fats. They are higher in proportion of saturated fats. That's what it means. So every particular oil will have all three states in it, but the higher quantity which is it. So simple way to understand these three things is that so every fat has this, the glycerol chain part, which is standing, and then you have the three fatty acids, which is where the difference comes in. And let's say if the fatty acids have full carbon hydrogen, so carbon and hydrogen are in love with each other. So carbon and hydrogen, when it is fully saturated, it's very tight. It's like array, we won't even leave you, and it's all in a straight line. So that's what is saturated fat. So everything fits well, so it becomes a solid. It lines up so beautifully that it can become a solid at colder temperatures. Like I told before in the beginning, all the traditional oils come in the saturated MUFA higher category because PUFA would be less volatile, more volatile, and more likely to burn. Then the PUFA-rich oils is what canola, sesame also is actually a PUFA-rich. It has a slightly different, it has these antioxidants and stuff, but the other ones, the ghee, the mustard, the peanut, all of them have extremely high amount of MUFA and saturated fats compared to PUFA. And PUFA is canola, sunflower, safflower, and all those. And that's why they put it through the refining process. That's how they originally started, to make it more stable, to remove the free fatty acids, and to make it more shelf stable, and to make it more. So that's why they use it. Traditional oils, most of them, is very unlikely that they will have high PUFA content. The refined oils is more likely to have high PUFA content. I hope that makes sense.
Who said food and science cannot be romantic? The way you define, like so much of love coming out of in these definitions.
It's just an easy way to remember, na?
I know. It's also remember and to make others understand.
Yeah.
So Ranveer Rao, I remember meeting once. I remember meeting Chef Ranveer once, and we were having the conversation, and he mentions this, that food romance should be kept alive. This is how we should keep food romance alive as well. Why just stories, fancy stories कि वाजिद अली शाह ने ये किया था तो अकबर ने वो किया था. ऐसे साइंस वाली बातें से भी तो रोमांस हो सकता है.
I'm used to explaining bonds, ionic bond, and all that to my kids. So I come up with this is husband wife. This is some nonsense, right? I translate that exactly.
So when I tell my mom that we should use sesame oil or groundnut oil unrefined for deep frying, she said, "नहीं, deep frying ना वो refined oil से better होती है." So is that a myth? Which oil should be used for deep frying? Can they be used multiple times? Which oil should be used for
Yeah.
tadka?
So your mom is actually quite right. In
Yeah.
deep frying, you want to do refined oils because so all MUFA rich and saturated rich, even the unrefined version, the max they hit temperature is about 175, 207, and then only mustard and ghee it goes to 250. Okay, so mustard and ghee, mustard oil and ghee are the only exceptions in Indian cuisine that can actually withstand those high temperatures. The rest of them, it's better not to deep fry with them. You can make saute, you can make tadka. Tadka is a lower temperature; it's 175 degrees Celsius. And that you can use, your traditional oils, unrefined oils. But for deep frying, either use ghee or mustard oil or refined oils, because refined oils, they go through this multiple process where they are taking away all these free fatty acids, and then they let it. And so okay, so there is another caveat in refined oil also. There's this myth that you can use it as multiple times. Refined oils also start to break down. Okay, they start to break down. We don't see it unless it. So at there's a study which says after 7 times you start getting these toxic compounds that are formed because of this overheating, and it starts to become actually quite bad for your health. Okay, 7 times. Now imagine in McDonald's and KFCs and all that, is it 7 times that they're stopping at? I don't think so. You know why? They add something called the defoaming, like an agent. It's dimethyl polysiloxane. So that they added to prevent the foaming from coming. So I actually spoke to a McDonald's employee, and they showed me the can that they're using, and they said they go through it like on a weekly basis. They have a scheduled rotation. So this chemical is added to prevent the foaming from happening. And by the way, this chemical can also be added to your Saffola or any some of the even the name brands in our home oils also, they use these ingredients. So to try avoid these products that have this stopping this foaming from happening, and because it's a visual indicator that the oil is going bad, and these guys don't want to see that, so they start using it. And then the worst thing of this is there is actually a market for selling reused oil, the heated oil, which is terrible. I mean, if at all anybody wants to take anything from the podcast, please don't use reheated cooking oils. That is very, very bad for your health. It's been proven to be carcinogenic in rats, and you can't feed humans that. So obviously, studies is not going to come out saying, I fed so many humans with reheated oils. But the studies from animal studies are very, very clear. Reheated oils, especially, they start developing all these compounds that are there. You're burning the oil itself. You're burning the whatever batter you're putting in, those ingredients. You're not able to go and take everything out. So those are going to keep burning and burning in them. And so you're exposing your body to such inflammatory substances. So try to completely avoid reheated oils, if at all, and you don't take anything else from the podcast.
So I have a follow-up question on that. You mentioned 7 times, right? Actually, 2 follow-up, not 1. You mentioned about 7 times, and that's about it. So when you are,
I mean that was like a bad. That's like obviously at home you want to try and do it like once or twice, and 7 is like the commercial thing. So you have a larger scale oils, and it's not in our kadai. Hopefully you don't want to say. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So that's the question actually. So in a restaurant, 7 times, and I know that most of us, we discard it or we just throw it, or I don't know what happens, but we discard it, right? That's for sure. But when you're cooking at home, how many times can you actually use it? Because also considering that when you're cooking at home, unlike the restaurant where, let's say for example, you're frying fries, okay, and you're going to use the same oil for the whole day. But but you're not going to keep your deep fryer on the whole time, right? So, for example, the order comes in and you reheat and then you throw in your fries, you take it out, then again switch it off. So, you're doing that multiple times in one day itself. But when you're frying something at home, let's say pakoda or fries, in fact, that's the only time maybe you're frying, because not every day you're eating fried food.
Sure,
Most of us don't
sure.
necessarily eat fried
Yeah,
food.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So the first question is how many times can you use it in a home setup, and second is, let's say for example if your answer is going to be one or two, then what would you do with the leftover oil? Can you use it like a shallow fry or cooking food otherwise?
Yeah. So I think everybody does this. This is common sense thing only. We usually, a lot of moms, what will they do? They'll do once or twice. They'll filter it out. They put it in a small dabba nearby, and then the next 3 or 4 days they would use it for their subsies and all that. And I think that
Yeah.
is fine. You don't want to be. I know the price of all these things. You don't want to be throwing things around. If you're really health conscious, you could stop after you fried it and you can dispose it off. But I know some people who do that, but it's not necessary. I mean, like I don't know what is the limit. I don't know if there's any study which said after a certain point, because you have to do these tests. You actually have these kits that they sell, which you can test these the amount of compounds that are generated. So nobody's going to sit and do that. Nobody's going to get your home kit and try and test it and then like. So I think that's a little overstretch. But
Yeah.
yeah, I would suggest that you use it once or twice, and then you take remember the burnt stuff. That is, and you know there's another fun tip that our Indian aunts and moms, have so much of knowledge. Man, yesterday I went to my sister-in-law's house, and she was saying, so she was making. She first made puris for all of us, and then she did. She had to make vadas and then plum, and then she put the plum in the oil, and then she realized, oh, she had to do one more batch, and then she saw these the black things. She's saying, that's why we should do a plum last in the South Indian cooking thing. You never fry it last, because then the small things just float to the bottom and you get this black carbon pieces that are down. She said the other stuff
Yeah.
will stay intact and it doesn't get that. And I forgot about it. And I was like, hey, yeah, what philosophy? Nothing. They know all these tips and tricks where they don't try to not burn the oil, burn the substance, and then they filter it out. They don't use the bottom, that sludge that is formed. Those are all excellent practices, which already our moms and aunts are doing, and I think you should continue that. Just don't reheat, reuse the same. If you want to make a next batch of pakoda next day, don't use that oil. Use fresh, and then that would be my advice.
Got it.
Yeah, that
So,
also because it
couple
will
of
taste
things.
better.
Yeah.
I've heard that. Yeah, I've heard that also certain amount of heating is required to make it taste better. Like the fresh batch of oil also doesn't. That's one of the reasons why even the fast food restaurants do it. But yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah. So even amongst the refined oils, which ones are the best? And that's one part. Second part is, how do I read the label if I want to buy a refined oil? I mean, unrefined oils typically don't have any other ingredients, but if I want to buy refined oils, how do I read the labels to buy the right one?
okay, I'll do your first. First question is what?
Which is the even amongst refined oils, if I
Oh,
have
the
to use
label.
refined
Label.
oil,
Okay, yeah.
which one should I use?
Among the refined oils, yeah. Among
Yeah.
the refined oils, I think canola is good because it's high in MUFA, as opposed to the safflower and sunflower, which is high in PUFA. Um, that's kind of my thing. And then I like, if I'm going refined, I like to do refined coconut oil and refined sesame oil. In fact, I believe in sesame oil also, it like is like companies like Ideyam and all use a traditional method of making. They use it with the karipati. They don't make it with the. So if you have a refining process that still uses a traditional Indian method, then I would suggest you can go with that. Um, yeah, other than that, like I would rather, I don't think corn oil or safflower, sunflower. No, I stopped buying, but it's a personal choice, like what they guys want. And if for frying, maybe you can buy, but then they take off everything. It's pretty much you can replace one with the other. Only corn oil, I think, has a slightly golden color, if I'm right. Um, because corn oil actually has quite a high amount of antioxidants, but then they process it quite highly also. Again, yeah, refined oils, you make your own judgment, but I prefer to use canola because of the mono MUFA content. The regarding a question on labels, look out for TBHQ added to in your. So oil, you'll think, yeah, only oils, you buy a bottle. Turn it around and read the label, please, because even if it's a refined oil, they'll add TBHQ to extend the shelf life even more. So already the refining process is extremely intense. On top of that, they add TBHQ. So try to avoid uh, oil like that. Don't go for gimmicks like cholesterol free, trans fat free if it's a plant oil. Cholesterol free obviously is that any plant oil is a cholesterol free. Cholesterol is only coming from an animal product. So butter, ghee will have cholesterol. Lard will have cholesterol. Not a so having soybean oil with that name cholesterol free is not a showing off sign. It's like basic. It's from a plant. It will be cholesterol. Trans fat free again. If they say that, it's like you don't have to be impressed because trans fat, the process is to convert a liquid oil into a semi-solid. Partially hydrogenated will create the trans fats, which is converting it into a semi-solid, almost creamy structure. So if they're saying that they have taken a liquid oil and they put trans fat free, they've said that we have done you the favor of not converting it into an even unhealthier oil. So,
Like Vanaspati.
yeah. So thank heavens you've not made this soybean oil into a vanaspati. So don't be impressed with all those terms. Just go with your the traditional oils. What other? Yeah. Again, if you have a anti-foaming agent added to it, try to avoid it because it's a visual. It stops you from understanding whether the oil is going bad or not. So those are my tips.
Nice.
Super.
And now we're coming to the last segment of our podcast, which often is controversial or not. I don't know. I just we as Indians or we as humans like the word controversy, so I'm just saying that it will be tagged under controversy in our podcast. Okay. So you mentioned that your favorite is canola oil, right? That you prefer, not favorite, you prefer canola oil these days. But if you have to pick up any other oil apart from canola, which one it would be?
I mean, it's only the refined. I don't use any of. He asked for specifically for refined oil, which is my
Oh, so
favorite.
which one is your
I don't
favorite
use
oil in
canola.
general?
My favorite oil I buy is I buy extra virgin coconut oil, extra virgin olive oil, and cold pressed sesame oil. Those are my three favorite oils at home. I would like to use mustard oil. The thing is, as a South Indian, I'm not that comfortable with it yet. I know a lot of my Bengali friends love it, but I do buy it, but I'm a little, that flavor is a little too pungent for me at this point. I have to get used to it. But those are in my kitchen, I keep those only.
As somebody from Bihar and Jharkhand, I would suggest mustard oil. Yeah, or as the Bengalis and the Biharis would call it, that kadwa tel, because of that
Huh.
Kadwa
pungency.
Tel.
It's called kadwa tel.
I
Ah,
know, I know. I
Because
love it
it
in
is
chokka, like the salads. What do you call it? Chokka?
choka.
Is it
Yes,
chokka? The
tadka.
chokka? Yeah. I love that, but yeah, I have to learn, Sadaf.
No, the Biharis and Jharkhands, I think, oh, and the Bengali as well. Maybe I'm wrong, but at least my experience is that we do cook in mustard oil, but the tadka
Yeah.
and the chonka will be on ghee,
Okay. Yeah.
so that
Yeah.
you get both the kind of flavor.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Same for us.
like like
Um,
like
we have
nihari.
ghee for
Nihari
rasam.
is always cooked on. Oh yeah, yeah, ghee person. The thing is, nihari is always in mustard oil, not in ghee. People, I'm
I
just
see.
giving you a tip as well. Awesome. Now, your underrated and overrated food, because we talked about oil, so let's talk about fried food. Your under and overrated fried food.
You fried food.
It could also be
This is
vada
what
pav.
I
I'm
do.
just
it could also be I mean, if not fried food, any food actually.
So
Underrated, overrated.
underrated is I'll tell you you said controversy, so I'll start this controversy. Underrated food is palm oil, and a lot of people in India hate that word palm oil. But
Ah,
I think that the red palm oil, which has one of the highest carotenoids of any substance, let alone oils, it's a beautiful orange color and all that. So that is a completely that's the original form, and they've taken it and stripped it and fractionated it and made it into like completely disassembled it. And so we people Indians hate the term palm oil, but actually
Correct.
palm oil was introduced to replace trans fat, the partially hydrogenated oils. And so it's a natural oil and it's actually good, but it has a lot of baggage to it, environmental, labor issues, all that. And so we have to go past it, but it is underrated. It definitely is. It has huge, it's called Donde oil in parts of Africa. They have used it for centuries, and I think we should give it a go.
Where
That's
can
my
we
underrated.
buy this? Can we buy this in India? And what should we look for? Because palm oil is everywhere, right? All kinds
So
of palm oil.
I don't know what India. I look for it, but in US it's starting to come up as red palm oil and
Red
like a
palm oil.
virgin red palm
Virgin
oil.
palm
And
oil. Okay.
even in peanut butter, I know Justin's like the peanut butter cups that they sell. They use the Reese's. They use hydrogenated fats to make that creamy thick peanut butter in the center of the cup. And so I know that Justin's was using that palm oil. Last I remembered, they were trying to source that ethically and use that as a filling. So it's now a lot of food manufacturers are trying to get especially the ones who are trying to stay clean.
Right. So red palm oil is what we should look for, not the
Yeah.
other kinds.
Yeah. So overrated. I'm not able to think of any. Overrated will be refined oils, anything. I think they're all overrated. Because they just they sell it so well, na. They just say they just say along it's the way they market it is just like everybody thinks that it's so great. And
Yeah.
What about foods? What do you think is an overrated food and underrated food for you personally?
underrated food, I love anything with jaggery. I am a big fan of like I had this mishti doi, Amul's mishti doi with jaggery, and I was like, "Arey wow!" It has only 5% jaggery. The rest of it is sugar, but the flavor of jaggery, I am like a big fan.
Yeah.
I just love it,
Right.
and that's my whole thing with pet peeve with that Archit, you also say that like jaggery, the flavor is there. Yes, it's equal to sugar. I'm not trying to say that it doesn't, but that flavor is so amazing. Like I know I'm not eating a low sugar thing, but then I love that. So that is my underrated. Overrated is any samosas. The place is stuffed with all fried items of samosa. Kahan bhi jao, puff, samosa, fried, everything. Oh God, yeah. I think we could go back to our butta and cucumber with salt and chilies days. I think we could use a little bit of that and less of the refined stuff.
I agree with samosa. That samosa is also not my favorite thing.
I don't. I give it off mine. I give it out to my kids.
But I like keema samosa, so I'm just also clarifying that as well. I do like keema samosa. I am not an aloo samosa fan.
It is so hard to get a good, flavorful aloo samosa filling. There are some people who have that knack of getting that nice soft and everything inside. And you taste into that and you think, okay, this person knows how to make a samosa. 99% of people, including me, I don't know how to make a good samosa. But you get that 1%, you shouldn't let go of that 1% who makes really good samosa.
My weakness with fried food is just chaat. I absolutely love chaat. And you need to fry the ingredients of chaat to make it.
That you have to make an exception. No? Chaat is chaat. Chaat is king. No?
Yeah.
Like pani puri or golgappa. Okay.
Yeah.
Correct.
And listeners can go check out our episode on chaat, which is very lazily named to chart chat. So go check that out as well.
Oh yeah, I love your play on names in everything. You guys think a lot, na? So good, very funny, good fun name.
That's the problem. No, Swetha, we don't think a lot. Did you not realize of all these random jokes? It just comes out.
Nice, yeah. Nice.
Every time when we think, and I'm not kidding, and for everybody who's listening, every time when we think, which is two of us, Archit and I, we never come to consensus. We will start debating. Nahi, ye sahi hai, ye galat hai.
Spontaneous is
point is, they're like, ye acha lag raha hai. डाल दिया.
Good. Keep that gut feeling up. That's nice.
हाँ.
It's funny.
It's a gut feeling.
Yeah.
Great.
Awesome. So on that nice, good, oily, slippery note, करते हैं हम अपनी दुकान बंद. And everybody else, your oil is your oil. None of our oil. So oil white. Shall we shut our shops today, Archit?
Yes. And before that, Swetha, where can our listeners find you on social media?
Yeah, sure. So check out my website, webtradermyfood.com. We'll give the link. But yeah, on Twitter, I'm really active at upgrade_my_food. In Instagram, I'm just kind of tinkering around. Again, same, look for upgrade my food, Swetha Sivakumar. Facebook, I'm not. I do a very poor job of it. But Twitter, yes. If whoever is on Twitter, please do follow me. I just love interacting and giving out my gyan and just generally time passing on Twitter. Yeah, I love it. Yeah.
Touche.
We will have all the links as well in the show notes, so people can go and click, and then follow. And as Swetha said, जाएं बात करें, ज्ञान व्यान लेके आए, IAS बने, पढ़ाई करें थोड़ा सा.
इतना भी नहीं.
Awesome. करते हैं अब दुकान बंद.